It's been years since I last spoke to my parents. Not out of pettiness, but out of necessity. Because they made a decision that damaged me in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. When I was a kid, they brought someone into our home who turned my life into a nightmare. And instead of protecting me, they protected him. Now they want forgiveness, a fresh start. But I'm not sure I owe them that. So, Reddit, am I really the one holding a grudge? Before everything went wrong, I had what I'd call a decent childhood. Nothing perfect, but nothing traumatic either. I was an only child, and my parents and I were pretty close. We'd have movie nights every Friday, my mom packed my lunches with notes inside, and my dad always made time to help with school projects. It wasn't some storybook life, but it was safe. And safe felt good. I was a quiet kid. The kind of kid who followed rules, didn't get into trouble, and trusted what adults told me. I wasn't super outgoing, but I had a few close friends at school, and I liked things like reading, drawing, and building Lego sets. Looking back now, I realize I was also pretty emotionally vulnerable. The kind of kid who needed reassurance and kindness more than most. And for the first 11 years of my life, I had that. I never could have guessed that everything would change so quickly. That the people I trusted the most, my own parents, would make a decision that would leave me feeling betrayed, unheard, and completely alone in my own home. When I was 11, my parents sat me down and said we were going to be helping someone. His name was Daniel, and he was the son of a family friend who had recently gone into foster care after his parents' situation got messy. Something about drugs and neglect. My parents explained it like we were doing a good deed. He just needs a safe space for a while, my mom said. It's only temporary. You'll be doing something really kind by sharing your home. I didn't argue. I remember actually feeling kind of proud that my family was helping someone in need. When Daniel first arrived, I tried to be polite. I offered to show him where the snacks were, helped him find stuff around the house, and even let him borrow my video games. He didn't say much to me at first, just kind of looked at me like I was a nuisance. My parents acted like saints during that time. They bragged to friends and family about opening their hearts and home. And when Daniel was quiet or cold to me, they'd say, "He's just been through a lot. Give him time." So I did. But time didn't make things better. It made things worse. It started small. So small, in fact, that I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. Daniel would accidentally knock over my Lego builds or change the channel when I was watching something. He'd take my things without asking, then act confused when I looked for them. Once, he spilled juice all over my homework right before bed. When I told him to stop messing with my stuff, he just smirked and walked away. At the dinner table, he'd interrupt me constantly or mimic my voice in a high-pitched, exaggerated tone. If I asked a question, he'd answer it first. Always wrong, just to annoy me. My parents laughed it off like it was some harmless sibling rivalry. "He's just adjusting," my mom said. "Don't take everything so seriously." I did try to speak up. Multiple times. I told them it didn't feel like teasing. It felt like I was being targeted. My dad would shrug and say, "Boys will be boys," while my mom encouraged me to be the bigger person, because Daniel had been through a lot. At night, I'd lie in bed feeling tense. I wasn't used to feeling anxious in my own house. My home, the one place where I was always supposed to feel safe, was starting to feel like a place I had to survive. And every time I was told to just give him time, I started to wonder how much time Daniel would get, and how much longer I was supposed to endure it. The worst part, he seemed to enjoy watching me squirm, and somehow that made me feel like I was completely alone. Things escalated quickly from annoying to scary. Daniel stopped pretending to be subtle. He would push past me in the hallway, shove me into door frames, or, accidentally, drop his backpack on my feet. When I sat on the couch, he'd sprawl out and stretch his legs over my lap, daring me to say something. If I did, he'd just mutter something like, "Crybaby," and grin like he'd won something. My drawings started going missing. My school folders would be rifled through, and papers would go missing or come back with stains on them. Once I spent an entire weekend building a project for science class. Daniel snapped the main piece in half right before I left for school. I still remember the sick look of satisfaction on his face as I stared at the broken model. Worse, he'd mess with my computer when I wasn't looking. I'd log in and find deleted documents, weird messages left open, or all my desktop icons scrambled. I tried setting passwords. He found ways around them. I started doing my homework at school or the library just to protect it. Emotionally, I was falling apart. I'd flinch whenever I heard footsteps behind me. My stomach turned every time I walked through the front door. I stopped inviting friends over, and even when I was alone, I'd find myself looking over my shoulder. It felt like I was always waiting for the next thing he'd ruin. I begged my parents to take me seriously. I told them I was scared. I said I didn't feel safe. But every time it was the same response. He didn't mean it. "You're overreacting." He's had a tough life. And when I cried, my mom told me I needed to learn how to deal with difficult people. But I wasn't dealing with just a difficult person. I was being emotionally and physically tormented in my own home. The worst part? Daniel knew they wouldn't believe me. He'd smirk at me behind their backs, like he knew he'd already won. Things weren't any better at school. Daniel was just 1 year ahead of me, and somehow he managed to twist the story before I could even open my mouth. He told people I was weird, sensitive, a snitch. He made up stories about how I cried if someone looked at me wrong. And for whatever reason, people believed him. It got to the point where I couldn't sit at certain tables without getting snickers or sarcastic remarks. Friends I had since 3rd grade stopped talking to me altogether. He'd bump into me in the hallway and say things just loud enough for others to hear, things he knew would embarrass me. It worked every time. I started avoiding home as much as I could. After school, I'd go to the library or hang around at friends' houses. Anywhere but under the same roof as him. At night, I'd pretend to be asleep just to avoid talking. Even my body felt like it was shutting down. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and numb most of the time. I'd see my parents laugh with Daniel over dinner and feel invisible. If they could smile like that around him, how could they not see what he was doing to me? That's when something inside me started to shift. Not just sadness anymore, but hopelessness. Like I didn't just lose my friends or my peace, I'd lost my family too. The moment everything shattered happened one rainy Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in the living room doing homework when Daniel came in, dripping wet from outside. Without warning, he grabbed my notebook, tore out pages, and crumpled them in his fist. I tried to reach for it, but he shoved me hard against the wall. "Stop being such a loser," he sneered, pressing his body into mine. I could feel the rain dripping down his jacket and onto my skin. I was frozen. Part of me wanted to scream, but another part was just stunned. It wasn't the first time he'd been physical, but this time it felt heavier, meaner. I shouted for my mom, but she was in the kitchen and didn't hear. I ran to her, desperate, tears streaming down my face. "Please make him stop," I begged. But instead of comfort, I got silence, and then a shrug. "He's a kid with problems," she said flatly. "You need to learn to live with it." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're supposed to protect me," I said. Not him. Not if he hurts me. My dad walked in then, arms crossed. You're both kids. Work it out, he said dismissively. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. I realized then that my parents had made their choice. It wasn't me they were protecting. It was Daniel. That day, something inside me broke. The person who was supposed to be my safe place had failed me utterly. My trust in them evaporated like smoke. I felt completely alone, abandoned by the family I once loved. And with that betrayal came a deep, aching pain that nothing could fix. I cried myself to sleep that night, knowing that the home I dreamed of had turned into a prison. The years that followed the breaking point were a quiet struggle to survive until I turned 18. I stopped, trying to fix what was broken at home, and instead focused on getting through each day with as little conflict as possible. I gave my parents the silent treatment not out of anger but because I had no energy left for arguments or explanations. Talking felt pointless when no one was truly listening. I became a master of strategic avoidance. I stayed in my room, plugged into music or schoolwork, avoiding Daniel whenever I could. I learned his patterns, when he'd be out, what rooms to stay in, and how to navigate the minefield of the house without setting him off. My parents barely noticed my efforts to disappear, or if they did, they chose to ignore it. I stopped asking for help or comfort because it was clear that none would come. Mentally, I checked out from my family long before I physically left. I felt like a ghost living under the same roof. Seen but invisible. There but not really present. The love and safety I once craved were replaced by a numbness that shielded me from constant hurt. All my energy went into planning my escape. College became my beacon of hope, a way out and a chance at a new life. I researched schools, applied for scholarships, and saved every penny I could from part-time jobs. I pictured myself moving into a small apartment, finally free from the toxic environment. Though those years were some of the hardest, they taught me resilience and how to survive on my own terms. I knew I couldn't change my past, but I was determined to control my future. The day I finally moved out for college was a mix of relief and overwhelming emotion. Packing my bags, I felt like I was shedding a heavy weight that had been crushing me for years. Leaving that house behind wasn't just about gaining independence, it was about escaping constant pain. I didn't look back. Almost immediately after settling into my new life, I cut all contact with my parents and Daniel. I blocked their numbers, social media, and anything that might remind me of the past. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was necessary. The relief I felt was immense, like breathing fresh air after being underwater for so long. Still, the trauma didn't disappear overnight. Memories haunted me. Little moments that made me flinch, sounds that triggered anxiety, the lingering fear of confrontation. I went to therapy to start unpacking the pain and learning how to heal. Despite the trauma, I was finally free. A few years later, out of nowhere, I got a message from my mom. She said Jake had changed, that he was different now, and that she wanted us to be a family again. At first, I hesitated to respond. Part of me wanted to believe things could be better, but deep down, I knew the wounds hadn't healed. She kept saying we should move on, like the past could be erased with a few words. There was no real apology, no acknowledgement of how their decisions had shattered my childhood. Instead, she subtly implied that I should be the one to forgive and forget if I wanted peace. They still deflected responsibility. We did what we thought was best, she said. We never meant to hurt you. But their actions told a different story. I felt they were asking me to just erase years of pain to fix their own guilt. That wasn't fair, and it wasn't something I could do. Not yet. I responded firmly, explaining that I wasn't ready to forgive or reconcile. It wasn't out of spite, but self-protection. I told them I needed time, space, and respect for my healing process. I reminded them that trust had been broken, and it couldn't be repaired overnight. My mom and dad were upset. They tried guilt-tripping me, saying I was tearing the family apart and refusing to move forward. Extended family joined in, pressuring me to make peace for everyone's sake. But I stood my ground. I knew that setting these boundaries was the only way I could take care of myself. Forgiveness would come one day, maybe, but not until they truly understood and took responsibility. Until then, I would protect my peace, no matter how difficult that made others feel. After I set my boundaries, the fallout from family was immediate and painful. Relatives started calling me selfish, cold, and distant. They acted like I was the problem for protecting myself instead of being grateful for the family I still had. My aunt even told me, "You're missing out on family moments you'll regret forever." I tried explaining why they were wrong, that the so-called family I was expected to join included the person who tormented me for years. I told them I wasn't rejecting love or connection, but I couldn't ignore the past and pretend everything was okay. I needed to heal on my own terms. Despite their pressure, I held firm. I reminded them that sometimes family means standing up for yourself, even if it means being apart. It wasn't about hatred, but survival. They didn't understand my pain, and that was their loss. Looking back on my childhood, I realize how much being unheard and dismissed damaged my sense of self. I was a quiet, trusting kid who believed my parents would protect me. Instead, I was left alone to face cruelty, which made me question my worth and safety. But I'm proud of how far I've come. I survived years of pain and chose peace over bitterness. Healing hasn't been easy, and I still carry scars, but I'm learning to love myself and value my boundaries. Closure might never come, but I'm making my own peace, one day at a time. So, Reddit. AITA for refusing to forgive my parents after they forced me to live with my bully. I know it sounds harsh, but this isn't about holding grudges. It's about protecting my mental health. I want to heal, but can that happen without forgiveness? Or am I justified in standing firm? I'm still trying to figure it out.